Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. We are starting right now. For all the questions, please send them to the Guild server in the channel workshop Q&A. The link is right now on the Zoom chat, everyone. I will hand it off to ItsKoiske to talk about localization in the metaverse. Enjoy.
All right, everyone. I hope everyone's been enjoying Connect 22 so far. I know I've definitely enjoyed some presentations. But now let's talk about the most favorite thing in the world, which is localization. So today on the agenda, what do we got? We got what is localization and how does it work? Always good to remember to talk about what we're talking about first before we get into the nitty-gritty. Why you should localize, a guide for how to set up translations, and useful resources that I've spent way too much time digging for. But first, let's talk about who am I and why you should listen to me. My name is Paulina. I am a 22-year-old Roblox dev, translator, community manager, and a Guilded partner. I work for the best studio in the world known as GameFam. I have been on Roblox since 2013, and I've been developing games and other experiences since 2014. I have been localizing Roblox-related text and announcements since 2015 and experiences since 2019. As of today, I have contributed to roughly 8.3 billion visits. And I work with games like Work at a Pizza Place, Retail Tycoon 2, Royal High, Islands, Bed Wars, and many other smaller games, as well as other stuff that I work on outside of Roblox. And here is a cute little photo of me, because why not? So let's talk what is localization. How does it work? You might be surprised that localization is more than just translations. Localization can make linguistic changes, which is essentially changing proverbs and idioms to fit the target language more, because translating stuff directly sometimes is not the best approach. I have some experience. Cultural changes, which is essentially changing up colors, showing some stuff and hiding them from a target audience to make sure that you don't offend anyone. And legal changes, which is essentially switching up different mechanics and blocking certain stuff to fit the target age group for certain countries that you're targeting. You might know it as PEGI, ESRB, ACB, or SURO. As for Roblox only provides tools for linguistic and legal changes. You cannot do cultural changes as of yet, but I've seen people do some very interesting stuff to try to accommodate that as well. And let's talk into detail of what Roblox provides. Get policy info for player sync. Essentially, it grabs your geolocation and restricts content based on that. The localization portal for all the localization needs that you might need, set up and translate. You can access it through roblox.com/translator portal. Localization table import export tools. They're essentially tools in the Roblox Studio which allow you to export raw CSV files that you can upload to Google and have them edited externally. And automatic translations, which is Roblox's in-house AI generated localization. So why localize? I have 4 reasons why you should localize. You can connect with other people from across the globe. I personally, some of my best friends that I've met through Roblox are from Spain, Moscow, Brazil. They're very great people and, love them to death. You might find them too. You may find a newer audience that may be much more interested in your game than your target English speaking audience. There has been a few examples that I know of games that I've worked on that weren't very popular in the English-speaking countries, but they were very popular in places like Brazil. Like, they were very popular to the point where the developer decided altogether to stop supporting English and create a new game that was fully translated by a translator into Brazilian. A less involved process that'll help revive your game. This could be, a huge update on its own if you want a game to come back essentially to life. It's had low player count. It's very useful. I've seen people do it. And so there are some games that are years old at this point that are still around because of localization. And making your game accessible. Accessibility is very important for many people. And one of the key things for accessibility is the ability to give people an opportunity to try your game out, even if they're not the intended audience. One of them is being able to actually understand your game, which localization helps. But now, if you don't listen to me, listen to some other amazing people that I have worked with currently in the past. Well, I'm not going to read the testimonials. You can read them for yourself. I'm just going to quickly talk about each of the developers individually. The first one is one of the best developers for Tycoons, Ultra. I have worked on every single of his projects, from the old Clone Tycoon series all the way up to Restaurant Tycoon 2. They're very great games, highly recommend. And if you're a Polish speaking person, you might have seen my work through there. And the other ones that I'm also currently working with is Haggy125. You might know them as the developer of Retail Tycoon 2. Both acronyms are the same. You may get, twisted up sometimes. It is a very popular game at the moment. A lot of different contributions from all around the world, and I constantly work with creators and players from many different target countries with that game specifically to bring the best localization I possibly can. And yeah, they both very highly recommend translations. So now that I've convinced you about why you should localize, let's talk about how to do it. Let's start with choosing what do we want. You should always ask yourself those questions that I'm going to put on a screen right now, as I've seen many people who did follow those questions and made sure that they're sticking to a plan. They've spent much less time on localization rather than spend days trying to figure out what they want to do. Which tools do you want to use? Do I want to edit it in Roblox through the translator portal, or do I want to go off-site and have developers just contribute through that? Or altogether, do we want to even just use automatic translations and ignore it? Where do you want to hire from? There are many different pools that you can pull from that we'll be talking about later. How do we plan on maintaining localization? What do you do once you ship the first translations? Do you keep going? Do you drop it? Was it a one-time thing? Do you want other people maintaining it for you? And how will I handle reports from users? Essentially, sometimes mistranslations happen, and it's always good to have the best place for people to go and report those and just talk to you about what's the best possible way you can translate something. So a little more into detail what Roblox provides. The auto scraper, or the automatic text capture. I'll be referring to it as auto scraper throughout the entire thing, so keep that in mind. So it essentially allows you to get all UI from the game, except for core UI. Roblox provides direct translations for those. And despite the name, it's not automatic. You should always go in-game, play your game a little bit before you send it off to translators. And, make sure you click through everything so you can be sure that all of your strings that you'd like to translate are there. Localization tables, the translator portal on Roblox, which once again can be accessed through roblox.com/translator portal, or the experiences game settings in Studio, whichever is easier for you, along with Studio localization tools, which must be used by a third-party website in order to edit. So, how do you use the auto scraper? To enable it, you do have to go into the experience, press configure localization. In details on the left-hand side, just select localization. In the settings, toggle automatic text capture. And as I've mentioned earlier, play the game by yourself, or if there's enough players, enough concurrence that can, do it for you. Essentially just wait 24 hours and, for it to do everything that needs to be done. Preparing the table for the translators. Now that we've got all the text captured and you know what you want to do, you're preparing everything for the translators. So the Autoscraper tends to catch junk, which I classify as either strings captured incorrectly or something that is not meant to be translated, which you can disable auto localize in the strings properties and essentially delete all entries that you don't want localized or faulty. And there are two ways you can delete junk strings. One has been recently added, which is the new translator portal, which is currently in beta. And essentially you can do it from the translator table itself if you have the editing access for the games, for the game. Or you can download the raw file and just, delete it like that. Personally, the third-party option is much quicker than Roblox's solution. However, I cannot stress this enough. Please make sure to always import changes into Studio. I've had that happen to me a few times where I helped someone out and I totally forgot to send them the actual file afterwards. And yeah, it was a wild ride. So now you have all the junk removed from the table. Now you just add all languages to the table, which is in the portal, same place as earlier mentioned. Just go into your localization settings and it's on the first page on the bottom. In Google Sheets, you have to add the language code to yourself to the empty rows, as I'll show in a second. And remember to use the language code or ISO 639x1 for each language, as Roblox and any other website and machine will only recognize those, which is, here's the example of it. For Russian, we have RU. For Polish, we have PL, PT for Portuguese, ES for Spanish. And you cannot type in Russian, Polish, Portuguese, Spanish, not at least until like Roblox maybe provides implementations for that. But it is like that because essentially that's how each computer in the world essentially reads it. So always remember to do that. You can also Google those if you do. So we have everything set up. We have an option to add translators and languages to this. So now you have to hire someone, and you can hire from many places. So you got the Talent Hub and the Dev Forum, which mostly house semi-professional translators who are experts in the field of translating Roblox games. You have your own community, which know your game in and out and are always very eager to help. Or you can go to places like Twitter, Discord, Guilded, and ask around, and you can find anyone who would be willing to localize for you. And here's some of my personal tips for hiring. Do not hire without offering proper compensation. And by proper, I mean either Robux or any other currency that they request, real currency. In-game currency does not hold as much value because of the fact that games are very fluid in their lifespan. Some games might be 10 years old, like Work at a Pizza Place, but your next clicker simulator might not survive a whole month. Therefore, it's like cryptocurrency. You shouldn't be putting your trust into it and making if you want to make sure that people are properly compensated for the amount of work they do for you. But if you don't think that someone's maybe too expensive for you, you can always go lower. There are many different translators at many different price points that I know and probably could recommend to you if you've asked me about them. Scout out the Talent Hub with the translation on the intended language and enabled in filter. Essentially, the Talent Hub, if you go through creators on the Talent Hub, you are able to filter through different options. Me and a few other translators, we have our profiles tagged, for example, as Polish fluid, English fluid, Polish native, Spanish, intermediate, and you can always filter someone out like that. That's the easiest way to go through the website like that. And hire always one person for one language. This is just a tip for if you're hiring someone and you'd like to, essentially make sure that your localizations are good. Best way to do it is just hire one person and have the community engage with them afterwards. It's much easier as the burden of proving that someone has actually done their work is on you, the employer. And therefore, you just want to make things easier for yourself instead of having to deal with people bickering about localization. And make sure to specify which method you want to use. If you're hiring translators, some people are specialized in the translator portal, others prefer the third-party options as it makes certain things much easier than the others. It's always good to make sure to mention, hey, I want to hire you. This is the method I'm using. Are you interested? Now that we've got translators, now time to add them to your table. For the translator portal, go to configure localization, select translators, and you can add the users from there. For Google Sheets, press share next to your profile picture. You type in emails that they give you. Get link is also a good option. However, I do not recommend it because, as you guys know, there are different types of scams going around and about where, it happens that someone gets their Discord hacked and someone unwanted gets access to your translations table and just starts messing around with it without you even realizing this. So the only way to really secure yourself from having someone meddle with your stuff, essentially just the share option. So maybe you just don't want to hire translators and you want to do it on your own. Well, good news for everyone. As of a few days ago, Roblox made this feature available for everyone. Previously, it was only available to the top 100,000 new games and experiences. And, to enable it, you go into the same localization settings, under languages, in supported languages for the game. You just have to click on the 3 dots next to the language and turn on auto translation. It currently supports Thai, Turkish, self-simplified and traditional Chinese, French, German, Indonesian, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. There are many more languages coming. Roblox is actively working on the localization table, as you can see at the very first point here. Now that we either have let auto-translate do its thing or the translators have finished their work, it's time to ship the translations. If you haven't yet at this point, you have to make sure that 100% everything that you have in your translator table is filled up. They're there's nothing that you don't like in there. Alternatively, you can send it off to have another opinion in there as well. See how other people think about it before you ship it to the game. And once you make sure that everything's okay with your table, you just go to your game's localization settings, enable use translated content, and from there, the localizations will only ship from a new update to the game. You have to publish the game once you enable this in order for translations to populate in a newer server. And they will only populate on a new server. So now that we have all the localization shipped, everyone's happy, time to talk about maintenance. So here's a few questions that should help you with planning this very important step. How often do you plan on maintaining the localization? Is it like a weekly update, bi-weekly, monthly, bi-quarterly, quarterly, etc., etc.? This is essentially how much time you want to give translators, and how much work you want to give them before you ship a translations update. Can you budget a localization team for long term? I've had a few instances where unfortunately I was let go from the team because the game was doing much better than expected, and suddenly just the concurrent players dropped, money wasn't coming in as much anymore, and the owners of the game were suddenly caught in the realization of oh god, we can't pay this many people anymore, and they had to let go of the team because they simply just couldn't afford to pay us in a way that everyone deserved to get paid. Do you localize before and after an update? Some games like to update their localizations in their testing environments, and allow translators to freely go into the game and like ask to publish an update and make sure everything is great or an update gets shipped. Or sometimes they like to ship the game first, the game update, and after that they reach out to us, be like, hey, we got an update here, here's this many strings that you need to translate. And depending on if they want a deadline or not, they give it to us then. Do you maintain your team yourself, or do you just get someone who's experienced in managing translations? There are like everywhere else, there is a job for everything on Roblox, including managing translations and translators. There are generally, I do not recommend this type of hiring this kind of type of people, because they not on top of the regular translator fee, they also take their own fees, which can rack up the prices, and sometimes they just don't do a good job compared to just doing the job yourself. But that is something, if you're to you can think about whenever you're too busy or not to actually help maintain. So the final important thing is user reports. How will someone be able to let you know, like, hey, I think this should be translated instead of that? Do you give them an option for a direct line to the translator, or do you do it in your community hub or through your DMs? In a few games, I have credits either in-game or in the translator description where we've essentially wrote, hey, if you think something's mistranslated, reach out to ItsKoiske on, either through Roblox DMs or on Twitter. I have my DMs open, by the way. Or, sometimes they have a dedicated translations errors channel where, they're like, hey, this is mistranslated in Turkish. It should be this instead. And from there, we translators can debate the community and make important announcements or changes to the localization. How will the pipeline go? Which is essentially how will the report will be handled. Do you have, if they're reaching out to you specifically, do you have a dedicated channel in your Discord or Guilded about where you put those in, and the translator gives you the response to it, or they let you know that it's changed or not, or do you just let the developer handle everything? And unfortunately, sometimes it happens. People get busy, or their work might not be good enough for you, and there's a lot of people complaining about the localization. So sometimes you just need to let someone go. So you just have to ask yourself the question of, do I have enough time between translation updates where I can find someone new to replace the old translator and onboard them and make sure that they're up to speed with everything that we do with translation. So, good time for some good resources. DevHub's Introduction to Localization. Personally, I believe that while it is a great resource, it is very much outdated because of the fact that Roblox is working on a new translator portal for translators, which does not include many things that I have mentioned today. However, it has some good resources, like you can find the ISO codes that I have mentioned earlier, the language codes. You can find some good practices that still hold to this day. And where you should go for those is the create.roblox.com/docs documents page. It is a new thing that Roblox is working on that is currently in beta, but it has a lot of cool resources about translations. If you just go into the search bar for the website and look up localization, you'll have a few very good topics, including what I have talked about today. Everything is on paper and explained nicely to you, so you'll be able to see that. #translations tag on the dev forum. Always ask questions if you don't know something, and there will always be someone to respond to you. Maybe you have a question that has been already answered. Always good to look before you ask. You also have different portfolios there. I also offer consultations, which you can reach out to me on Twitter at ItsKoiske. And I am an event organizer on Roblox. I couldn't really do events up until now, but I got some currently translations related events scheduled personally, and we'll be posting them up publicly within the next few days. I hope to see you there soon. Time for some questions. Ask away. Everything's in the Gilded. Make sure to send over whatever you'd like.
Yes, thank you, ItsKoiske. And thanks, everyone. I repeat, let's get to the Q&As. Please remember to send all your questions to our Git server in the channel workshop Q&A. Link in the Zoom chat. And we have some questions for you, ItsKoiske. Are you ready for it?
Always ready for some questions.
Let's go. Gaps asks, what challenge have you faced during your projects?
One of the main challenge that I have faced is this prejudice notion of the fact that manual translators are not better than automatic translations, which I have managed to prove wrong time and time again. Unfortunately, because of the fact that we're simply not up in terms of the tech to get to the fluidity and the context correctness to localization as these humans are. We unfortunately, we cannot just plug everything into Google Translate and have the perfectly nicely translated game out to be just plugged in and published. It unfortunately requires time, and there are some some developers who think that this is a very quick 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you're out, you're paid $10 and you're going on with your life. And this is the major thing that I have encountered, needing to explain time and time again to developers that translations take time. Personally, not only because of my full-time job with GameFam, but also overall due to the fact that everyone has their own life. Translations sometimes for me take a day to sometimes even a week or 2 weeks, depending on what happens in my life. And yeah, some people just don't understand that it's like any other development process. It just takes time. Next question.
Yes. Area works to ask, which are the most popular language on Roblox? Are there a specific language that new games should support?
This is a per game basis. Besides of what's currently supported by Roblox in terms of languages, there are other languages that are much more popular in one game than the other. This is why you should probably, before you create your translations and go for that, you should always try to survey your game, ask your players, where are you from, what languages do you speak, and see the responses and just act based on that. As I said, I provide consultations too, and I can do that for you. I can hop in for a game for like a day or two, see what's popular, who's talking what language, and try to get back to you with that.
Okay, let's go with the next question. Batata Frita asks, do you have tips on how to become a pro translator?
So being a pro translator is a very long and hard job to do. The way I've known some Roblox developers do and translators is that they take certified tests that essentially are carry weight everywhere else outside of Roblox that you can do. Personally, because I live in the States and I was required to do those tests, a certain test for my college and everything. I took a TOEFL test, which is a test of English for foreigners. In the UK, I know the Cambridge test is very popular. And yeah, you just have to look up all those language tests that you'd like to, take part in. It is a very good thing to have because it definitely carries a lot of weight, especially if you want to become a translator in the end outside of Roblox. Other than that, you can just, go to university, study English, Polish, whatever your language is. And I know at least in Poland and in most of Europe, if I remember correctly, having a bachelor's degree in your native language usually helps it a lot for you to like just get hired as a translator in like studios like Bethesda. Yep,
Great, thank you. Next question is from 2406 Martin asking, do you have any tips for finding and locating mistranslations in your experience?
So if you personally know the language and you want to, survey the game yourself, it's essentially you just have to play the game. If in a lot of cases, if you give people a way to let them know, like, hey, this is the space where you can report something not being translated correctly, people usually come to you themselves. If not, you can always just hire another person and just have them go through the game and see if it's good or not. Just one tip for this one. Oops, crap, I'm sorry. One tip for this one is that people see certain things differently, and what could be translated for one person correctly, for the other it might not be translated correctly, and it could be something much different that fit the proper context. So when you're getting a second opinion, do not take it with a grain of salt. I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but also keep that in mind that, like, just like colors, people see things differently in certain cases.
Jesus Gamer 80 asks, how do I know when to hire someone professional instead of asking the community about it?
So, one of the key things that semi-professional on Roblox will give you is they will mention that their skill level of English is, for example, a B2 like mine is, or A5, A3, C1, etc., etc. This is called a European certification for languages. It's essentially how fluid you are in English or Polish, etc., etc. A lot of people who take translating seriously, they will take the test necessary to evaluate their level of English and will tell it to you. Also, feel free to talk to people before you hire them. Always make sure to be like, hey, can you translate this for me real quick? And, plug your either have someone to translate it for you, someone else, or just put it in Google Translate and see how close to Google Translate it is. And, alternatively, just put it in your browser, search Google, DuckDuckGo, whatever you're doing. And there's someone that has bound to use the sentence that you probably gave to them, unless you gave them something very insane that like no one would say. And you can always compare like that. The biggest tip for hiring is always talk to your people before you hire, because you'll always manage to catch someone or a red flag that you might not be okay with right before you get them on board.
Yes, the Owen asked, if a game has a wrong translation, it can be fixed?
Let me ask if I understand correctly. Can the translation be freezed if it's incorrect?
Yes.
Roblox unfortunately does not provide that tool, but if you believe that you get a report that something is mistranslated, you can, depending on how badly everything is mistranslated, if it's really bad, you can just opt into simply disabling the language altogether and testing the translations off the Maze live server before you just validate, make sure everything's correct, and if you have to, you just have to go through the process of hiring someone again.
Okay. Hinter the links ask, would you prioritize localization within the CI/CD pipeline when it comes to Roblox development, or would you ship localization after an update?
Personally, I believe that localization is just as important as any other, field of development, and you should always localize as like part of QA as before you ship an update. But if someone really doesn't care and thinks that it's okay to ship a game, then ship translations like a week after with like a minor bug fix, then that is also okay. You do you, as long as you're being respectful towards others about the fact that this game is translated, and just be nice.
Pack Trader asks, what is your opinion on manual translators and Roblox automatic translation? Can we use both to complement each other?
You can definitely use both to complement each other. Roblox's in-house translations are fairly okay. You can, use them pretty much, but best way to do translations if you want to do automatic translations is let Roblox do its thing for the languages that it supports, and then have someone go over them and correct them as, things go. So you have the best possible translations in your game. I have a lot of opinions on this current topic that I don't think would be worth sharing as we go over the hour mark. But generally, best practice is to just have both if you'd like, or just all the way manual translators that you bet heavily beforehand.
Next question is from Hinter, and it's asking, do you know developers, translators working with even more professional tools such as SDL traders or NL corrected translations?
So, I do know a few people who use Crowdin for their Roblox translations. I also, as a translator off Roblox, I also use Crowdin for a few projects, and I believe Crowdin is the only tool outside of Roblox provided stuff that other people have used. Yeah, yes, actually, Crowdin is the only one that I know, as it's easier to feed into the whole Crowdin ecosystem and then ship it out rather than just type it out manually. Everything, what I've seen.
Next question from Hinter too. Will you hire a Roblox non-experienced translator for a game?
Personally, I would not. I've had some run-ins with real translators on Roblox, and due to top games that have been around for quite a bit, hiring them instead of us. And a lot of translators outside of Roblox that either don't work with game devs or work with game devs, just work in the similar ecosystem but not with Roblox itself. They tend to be very conceited and just have this kind of thing where they think that they're much better than everyone else because they went to school for 4 years, which I generally as you probably might hear from my tone of words, that I very much despise. People had, regardless of one's, credentials, if they can prove it or not, you're a valid translator no matter what. And oftentimes I've seen people just, well, they did their work correctly, they were very much like a pain to work with. So personally, I do not recommend hiring from outside of Roblox. Personally, if you want to work with Roblox games, work with Roblox translators.
And we are reaching our last questions. Guarana is asking, how much time does it usually take to localize a full experience on Roblox?
So first, depending on if it's translated the first time or I'm coming in after someone and correcting, for first time localized experiences, depending on how text heavy it is, it can take from a total of 3 days up to a week, 2 weeks, if the game is very text heavy and has a lot of context. If I'm coming in after someone and I'm asked to translate something, I personally usually go through what's already translated and make sure that everything's translated properly. And from then it can take me upwards to a week to, have everything correct and ready to ship.
Perfect. Thank you for all the questions and the answers. I hope you enjoyed this fantastic trip through localization in the metaverse. Big applause for our speaker, ItsKoiske. And remember to come back for our later closing workshop at 3 p.m. PST and 6 p.m. EST. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you,
Bye.
ItsKoiske.
You're very welcome.